So I came across this clip the other day between Coleman, Hughes, and John McWhorter, where they were talking about criticizing, and I think in their discussion they were talking about perhaps the educational system, and particularly as it pertains to slavery and how it is taught in the schools. But I just thought it was interesting, their comments about criticizing in general. And then I want to say something that I would even go probably further in my view of it. So let's listen to what they have to say.
It's always better, I think, to do something constructive in being part of the solution rather than merely being a critic, which is a lot of what I think we do as writers and speakers. So I enjoy that.
So here, Coleman, he's making what I think is a valid point, which is essentially he's saying, do something constructive, be part of the solution. In this particular case, he's talking about teaching. He writes a lot about problems in the educational system. So he says, well, it's been good to teach, to learn what the issues are from the inside and try to correct them. So I think he's on the right path. I would go further than, or perhaps maybe just make another point before we listen to what John McWhorter has to say. And that's that you can start, there's a lot of personalities that criticize but don't offer any solutions. I could think of a bunch, left-wing, right-wing commentators on YouTube. They'll take something that happened and say, look how ridiculous this is, but what is their actual solution? It's how are they going to solve whatever problem it is that they're pointing out, And that's where you typically realize that they haven't thought about it in much detail, how they could. Like a good example of this, I think, is Tucker Carlson, because if you listen to him talk, he will almost always be criticizing something, or the people he interviews are making a criticism, but it's hard to find concrete solutions that they're offering, and particularly it's hard to find something that the people he talks to have already done to actually be part of the solution. Yeah. That's to pick someone on the right. To pick someone on the left, you don't have to look that far. You probably find someone like Hassan Piker, who is a pretty well-known YouTube leftist guy who also criticizes a lot of the political system and says, this is whatever he's talking about, this is ridiculous or ludicrous, without putting real effort into offering a solution or doing something himself to solve some of the problems he talks about. But it's not really to pick on those two people. Just say when you're listening, almost everyone is like this. So next time you're listening to someone criticize something, see if they offer a concrete view of how they would solve it, and also see if you can find how they are actually working towards solving it.
I learned early on that, and it bothered me a little bit at first to be told this, but then I realized that they were right. It's one thing to be a critic, and you have to be a critic, but if you never have anything constructive to say, if you're not saying, here's what we should do, then, there's another shoe waiting to drop. And in a way, it's a little inconsiderate and maybe a little cold. And so I always try to say, this is wrong. This is what we should do. And the answer is not just that we should go back to what things were like in 1895. But yeah, that helps. And teaching is part of that.
So you can see here that John McWhorter agrees with Coleman and says, he tries to offer suggestions to solutions. And so I think just to read, his is even perhaps, I guess, a lighter sort of agreement with Coleman, because he doesn't necessarily talk about actually building things or constructing solutions yourself. But in general, my point would be that, criticizing something is extremely easy. And at least by offering paths for improvement, you can see that, okay, this person has taken the issue seriously, right? Beyond just criticizing, which in itself is a necessary function in society. You need people to tell you, okay, this isn't working, this isn't working, this could be better, that type of thing. But then you also need people to, okay, if it's not better, or if it's, let's say this is not working well, what would be better, right? And then that's the next step. But then the step after that, and this is the really difficult step, is okay, So something doesn't work. We have a couple ideas about what a solution could look like. Now you need the people who can actually make that happen. And what you realize once you start trying to solve actual problems or make things better, try to improve things, is that it's really hard. It's extremely hard to build anything that works at all. And so that's why the people who actually build things that work and make things better are the people you should probably be listening to over people who are just criticizing something, right? It's nice to know that something can be better. It's nice to know that, okay, here's a way we can make it better. But even better than all that is someone who's actually doing it, you know? And so let's just take the example of self-criticism, right? So imagine the person that's like, most people won't even criticize themselves, but let's say someone is self-reflective enough to say, oh, let's take an example of drinking Cokes, right? So let's say they are drinking Cokes all the time, and they say, okay, I really shouldn't be drinking 5 liters of Coke a day, or whatever it is. And so they're like, it could be better. I could do better for my health. Okay, well, there's the person that might say that and might self-criticize, but then they just continue doing it all the time, and they never change anything. What does that bring you? Nothing. What does it bring that person? Nothing. It doesn't make them healthier. It doesn't do anything. Let's say now the person progresses a little bit further, and they say, I think a better alternative would be if I drink water instead of drinking Coke all the time. Okay, so now they have an alternative that's better. And let's say you ask them, you see them a couple months or years later, and you say, okay, so you're drinking Coke all the time. How'd it go with your idea about drinking water? Oh, well, I never tried it. I'm still drinking 5 liters of Coke a day. Did that help at all? No, it didn't do anything. Now take that same person. Let's imagine them actually quitting drinking all that Coke they're drinking all day. And instead of Coke, they've tried the alternative, they're drinking water. And now their teeth are better for it, and their general health is better. Which of those 3 people would you prefer to be? That's kind of my thing with this. And I think it's important because we listen to so many people that we get our input from, but there's one thing to listen to people that haven't done anything and haven't even suggested improvements. Most of the people you listen to won't even suggest what would be a better alternative. But if you could find those people, they're better to listen to than just people complaining. And the people who have actually built better alternatives are probably the best of all. That's my general point on this issue.